so many people ask me, well, if God is love, why is there evil in the world? Why do bad things happen? How could this God of love, right? That's a very reasonable question. First of all, there's two ways to look at that, and that's how we look at the world. Is this a static, fixed world? Like, did God say, ta-da, here it is, it's all here, and now look what a mess you made of it? Well, that's actually not what science tells us, right? Science does not say it's all static and fixed, all done with. Science says, nope, it has a very, very long beginning that we call the Big Bang, and that's just a way to describe how our universe came into being. And then science says it has taken a very, very long time for us to get here. Like 13.8 billion years on this little planet in a mid-sized galaxy, which is about 4.2 billion years old. And then we're like, what? Who can get their heads around this stuff, And people say,
let's
well,
just have a meeting about something to get something done.
Yeah. Really, we're talking evil. We're not talking like all this science caboodle stuff. And, science is just a way of describing nature. That's all we're doing. We're trying to understand, what are we? This is what philosophers did for eons. And so all that science is saying is, it's not really what it appears. It's really a very slow process that life keeps complexifying. It keeps getting richer in its degrees of relationships. It keeps moving towards greater unity. Imagine that. It's actually moving toward unity. Exactly, right? So I think part of the thing is we have this idea that there was an original garden that Adam and Eve were placed in, and then of course Eve, being the weaker of the intellects, got the cues wrong and lured Adam into sin, and the whole thing fell and death entered in and evil follows. When in fact that was a myth to really try to understand. That was a myth actually concocted in the 2nd century, to understand why bad things happen to good people. A myth is a story that may or may not be factual. And I think we have conflated the story with science, and we're all over the place. Whereas science is saying it's not so much original sin, so much as maybe a sin of origin. We begin in a state of chaos. That is how the Big Bang is, in a sense, this state of mass energy and, elements kind of dispersed all over. But given an amount of time, and maybe, maybe the presence of God at the heart of it, it's moving towards something. So maybe we might think that, well, Teilhard thought that Teilhard de Chardin was the Jesuit, of course, the paleontologist who was deeply immersed in Ignatian spirituality, so very much devoted actually to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and saw this power of love at the heart of the universe, even from a spiritual perspective. His idea is, well, sin is sort of part of being an unfinished universe. We're bound to get things wrong because we're not yet complete. It's like a kid, like a child, If you put the kid in a playpen and, you ask the kid to, come up with a blueprint for a house, they're going to just scribble all over the place, right? Because they're not yet fully formed. And I think the same is true on the human level and on the cosmic level. We're not fully developed. And it's hard for us to get our head around that because we're pretty sure we're fully developed and just keep screwing things up. And this is not to explain away evil on the moral level. There is something about the humans, that we do acquire language capacities. We do acquire the ability to reflect on things. We acquire the ability to know what's right and what's wrong. Evil is the privation of the good. It's where we strip something of its inherent goodness. And we create a negative energy. We thin things out. It's like taking a hammer and smashing something that's whole to pieces. And that's what evil does. It's the hammer of rejection. It's the hammer of denial that smashes the whole into pieces to say, I don't want to be whole. I don't want to be on this developmental path to some kind of unity. I hate unity. I hate wholeness. Clogs the flow. And that's a very, I think, a very isolated ego, a person could be deeply injured, deeply wounded in their lives. There's all sorts of reasons why people do bad things. It doesn't justify their actions by any means, but at the same time, to think that, you know, evil is something that's inherent to our condition is misguided. There is the inherent, you know, of our condition is that this is God saw it was good, and that means love is. I mean, the whole reason for Jesus is love, not sin, really, and that's, I think, what we're beginning to realize more and more, that God is love, and God so willed to express that love in a finite way, that He willed the Christ, in a sense, ever before sin entered the world. And imagine if we were to think of this universe as based on original love, and that it's love that's seeking to become more love, you know, and that we do get things wrong, right? And I think evil comes about when we fail to help one another to live in love. You know, we reject others. We don't have time for others. We don't have time for the poor or people who don't think like us or look like us. And I think that's problematic. You know, that's problematic in terms of we are part of the violence of our age, as much as we're part of the unity that seeks to flow in our own time.